What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. We've all got things about our favorite media properties that we would like to improve, Pokémon very much included, but it's not a bad thing to look at areas that they might be able to improve. So let's take a look at some of the more controversial or unpopular opinions about the Pokémon series. I'll start. Apparently, Pokémon has recently had a massive leak of just about everything, and I will not be talking about the actual contents of the leaks, but my hot take is that leaks are awful. Now, if it's like the beta sprites of the Gens 3 through 5 Pokémon, that's fine. It's actually kind of cool to look at what some of our favorite designs might have been. That sort of thing can be a fun laugh. But leaking information about games that haven't come out yet or haven't even been announced yet is despicable. If you feel the need to go out of your way to learn every scrap of information before you consume a product, that's fine. I think that's a horrible idea, and that surprises are a nice thing to experience, but what would possibly possess you to go online and shout it from the rooftops? Just to get some name recognition? Why would you ever spoil the surprises for everyone else? It's literally called spoiling, as in ruining the quality of. You wouldn't drink spoiled milk, and likewise other people will not consume a spoiled product. Plus, spoilers are so far outside of the spirit of cooperation and friendly teamwork that the Pokémon world tries to portray that it makes me wonder if these people have ever actually played the games. If you prefer looking up everything to enjoy a product, then so be it. But please bear in mind that there are just as many, if not more, that feel the exact opposite way, and the surprises are what makes the experience the most enjoyable it can be. Okay, so what about other Pokémon fans having so-called hot takes? We'll start with an easy one, like Lucas Sailor's assertion: I do not find the raids in Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet remotely fun at all. I don't understand why they kept it around, and I'm hoping that they will drop it in the next game. They won't. For someone who can't buy online, the high-tier ones are impossible. Well, I actually kind of agree with that, at the end there at least, with the really strong raids being way too hard in solo play. I know that they're sort of designed with co-op play in mind, but you really shouldn't be sacrificing a single-player experience and forcing people into a group project. Because without real people, you're left with NPCs that choose bad matchups and die due to poor decisions in Dynamaxing or Terastallizing. So even if you play perfectly, you can't always drag everyone else across the finish line. So I agree with that, but the practice of raids I don't think is a bad idea. It obviously takes inspiration from Pokémon Go, but the concept of working together with other players in real time is fun, and promotes the cooperation that the Pokémon world was always meant to. As for the online, you can get local backup in raids, no internet required, but that is tough when you can't find anyone close by to help you out. So I don't think that raids need to go, but it may be true that making them so integral to the core of each new region across the board might be a mistake. But let's go even more spicy with a comment from Don't Spike My Drink, who says, the 4th generation made me lose all faith in the entire franchise, and I never played any games after Gen 3. Mega Evolution is a stupid gimmick, making the games worse. The rivals should be bratty, mean, and teasing. Seeing as the 4th gen did not give this, made me feel not obligated to play through the games. Okay, there's a lot there, and it can certainly be considered controversial. We'll toss out the Mega thing first. I tend to agree, as you well know, I am not the biggest fan of Mega Evolution. So hopefully they can somehow improve it in the new Legends game, and please don't be posting any spoilers about it because I will delete you. But as for Gen 4, I cannot support that in the slightest. Gen 4 is solidly one of my favorites, with the Sinnoh region being so fun, and Heart Gold and Soul Silver being my favorite Pokemon games to this day. So I cannot condone putting them down so harshly. And the main reason given seems to be the rival not being a jerk, but by that logic, Gen 3 should have made you stop playing because they didn't have a jerk rival to fight either. Wally was the opposite, as a sickly weakling. So maybe that's not the main reason that you dislike Gen 4, but since it was really the only one given, I can't see how rivals changing could be blamed on Sinnoh instead of Hoenn. But then we have a comment from Peach Creed that says Delphox is greater than Greninja. And not to harp on it, because people know that I have no love for the Kalos water starter, but upon examination, I could see why you would think Delphox is better. I mean, by Gen 6, we have had water and dark types before, and numerous frogs, and multiple ninja-themed Pokémon, so all of the elements of Greninja could be argued to be pretty bland, and while fiery foxes were not new either, turning into a wizard was a vast departure from what we had seen, making it completely unique, while making the fire and psychic combination infinitely more accessible as a starter, when it was previously only on a hard-to-get mythical and a temporary damage-based form change, basically making Delphox the first fire psychic type to many out there. So I could see why you would value Delphox over Greninja, even if they both borrow a little bit from the past. But Chespin doesn't, which is why he's clearly the best one. But to stay on the starter train, let's look at Pizza7478, who says, "Hot take, there should be a starter option for every type." If you mean that there should be the potential for picking any type as a starter, then maybe, but if you mean that there's literally 18 starters to choose from, then no way, that would be a nightmare. It would bare minimum take up the first 54 slots in the decks, so number one, it would be almost impossible to catch them all in the same game, and it leaves room for basically nothing else in the whole region, and balancing them would be horrendous. Not to mention secondary typings would likely be out, since it can already make it complicated now with just 3 of them. So yes, I would love to see a different type triangle attempted for starters at some point, but trying to make starters for all of the types at once would overshadow so much of the rest of the game. It's a bad idea. So Spike the Porcupine says, "I think Nintendo, Game Freak, and the Pokémon Company need to give other legendaries a chance to advertise their brand." Yes, who doesn't like Mewtwo? But come on, it's been getting the most than anybody else for the past decade plus. And I didn't really agree at first because I wouldn't necessarily say Mewtwo is used as a brand mascot, at least not on the level of Pikachu or Charizard. But then I got to thinking, and Mewtwo does tend to pop up quite a bit. It was offered very special fanfare as a raid in Paldea, while being one of the only Pokemon to have multiple Mega Evolutions or multiple roster spots in Pokken Tournament, which is extra weird because Mewtwo is a man-made Pokemon, meaning either we are missing out on some very important lore, or there really should only be one Mewtwo. So why are we seeing so many of them? Like, what was it doing in the Kalos region? That makes no sense. So yeah, I feel like that's a valid observation to say that Mewtwo shouldn't be so prominent, just from a realistic perspective of the Pokemon world. But to your point, there are also plenty of other awesome legendary Pokemon that could get the spotlight. I guess the clone has the benefit of not being tied to a specific version of a game, so that if one of those other legendaries were promoted, they might expect some callbacks to a certain era of the franchise. Then you've got simple ones like Felcher saying, "Bring back Pokerus." I don't know if that counts as a hot take, but I tend to agree. It hurts nothing to have that strange contagion floating around to boost the Pokemon's EXP for a bit, and it was literally a badge of honor to have a Pokemon with the virus, or at least a symbol of it being cured. I guess the Pokemon medical care with Nurse Joy was just too good and they got rid of it outright. And as Piepilled says, Pokemon games are just worse since going on the Switch, in my opinion. And I can respect your opinion, I see the argument for sure. Both Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet had some pretty glaring flaws, despite their strides forward in different areas, but I don't think that I could say that on the whole the Switch has made Pokemon worse. I mean, with the side games especially, they've been doing great things like new Pokemon Snap. But even just looking at the mainline games, you've got Legends Arceus, and yes, it is a mainline game no matter what you say, and that game is great because it knows what it's trying to be and filling out that space the best that it can. And this may be a hot take, but I actually think the Let's Go games are really great for what they are. If you don't like the catching mechanic, then that's totally understandable, but you've got to admit that these are easily the most polished core Pokemon games on the Switch. So I think that just proves that a narrow focus can lead to good games. But when they get more ambitious and focus on the wrong things is when they start to falter. So I think maybe a better statement would be Pokemon needs to prioritize better on the Switch. That might be the boiled down premise of your argument. Raspberry Cookie says, Game Freak should actually revive some of their questionable decisions, like which Pokemon from Gens 1 through 5 should be fairy, and the shinies of a lot of Pokemon, since a lot of the coolest Pokemon have the blandest shinies. Well, I have to say that makes perfect sense because they've actually done it. Granted, it's been a long time, but they did change some Pokemon's shiny forms at one time or another. but it seems unlikely that they'll ever do it again, even though they definitely should because shinies are much better handled today than when they were a random algorithm. As for the fairy type, that's even less likely since that seems to be pretty set in stone, which is ironic because fairy changed a bunch of Pokemon already, but I say go for it. Why not go ahead and give Fairy to Manaphy or something? Or hey, if we're doing that, why not do it for other types too, like actually giving Kanto some dark types? They won't, of course, short of adding in new types for that to happen, but they go back to spruce up old Pokemon with updated stats and abilities and things all the time. So a new shiny form or typing just seems like the next logical step. And in that vein, Angel Whispers says, it's okay to rebalance what level does Pokemon evolve at in different regions. And I don't know that I've ever thought of that before, but that might just be the best possible alteration they could make in the series. Rufflet evolving at level 54 might have made sense in Unova, but when you can find the bird much earlier, it just ensures that you won't use it because it takes way too long to start contributing to the team. And by the way, they've actually done this too, like changing what level Cyndaquil evolves in Legends Arceus, so it's not totally off the table. But now Sako Sophie comes in with the controversial claim, Pokemon isn't a kid's game, and the games are made easier to be sellable to kids. Imagine half-competitive Gym Leader / Elite Four builds. Well, I just have to say, no, you're wrong. I mean, first of all, they have done half-competitive makeups with the likes of the Elite Four in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, with each of their Pokemon holding useful items, like with Aaron's Flame Orb Guts Heracross, or Lucian's Light Clay Mr. Mind to set up better screens. So not every game does it, but they do include harder options beyond the kids game level. But secondly, I think the overall point is still wrong, since Pokemon is indeed a product aimed at children. You're allowed to complain and wish that it wasn't, but it is. Many adults may buy the games now because they've grown up and stuck with the series through time, but that would be the same as saying that because a lot of adults still go to watch Disney movies, that Disney should no longer consider itself a kids-based product. That's clearly still their primary demographic focus, but hey, if they can draw in others at the same time, that's a win-win. Have they made some poor changes in effort of staying a children's product? Absolutely. But the games have always been sellable to kids, even back when they were a lot harder and basically explained nothing. Or when they actively had difficulty modes like in Black and White 2. That was still a kid's game. So you're allowed to complain that these children's games aren't measuring up to your expectations for higher game difficulty, but unfortunately that doesn't mean that they'll suddenly cater the games to your preferences. Sorry about that. But we'll settle on a fairly controversial one to end with Flash33C saying, I think 3D models get too much hate, especially the ones in Gen 6 onwards. While I'll admit that some models are worse than others, the same is true for some 2D sprites, and I think it's mostly nostalgia talking when people say sprites are better than models. Yeah, this is a subject that many people have a lot of passion about, but I'm not really one of them, so I feel like I can be objective and say they've got some good points. First of all, I find it funny to single out the Gen 6 onward crowd because they literally only ever had three-dimensional models, so saying you don't like how they look is really just critiquing the art styles of the more recent generations, which is also a popular stance, so that's fair. But the 3D models can easily convey the proper designs of the Pokemon that can get lost in the sprites, meaning that they'll look exactly like they're supposed to from an episode of the TV show or the plushes that you have. The main criticism that people seem to have of 3D models is the lack of character. They claim that sprites offer more personality, so really the models themselves are not the biggest problem, it's their lack of dynamic movement or proper characterization, and that comes down to even their attack animations that got so much scrutiny. So if the models got to move more and weren't so stiff, I think that would truly be the best of both for everybody. Although personally, I think that the colors were the biggest downsides of the 3D models, because a lot of them were far too muted and washed out. But that problem has gotten better over time, and of course the new textures applied in Gen 9 basically makes this a moot point, as looking better by default providing detail that a sprite never could. So if the models could loosen up and show some more individuality, I think it would easily close this whole debate. And then sprites would indeed only be better for nostalgia because some of them are just plain bad. And there are even some hot takes that are too bold for me, like saying that Hoenn doesn't have the best Pokemon designs because it clearly does. I mean, a good Pokemon design might not look the prettiest after all, for it to succeed in what it's actually trying to do. But those are just some controversial or unpopular Pokemon opinions. We could easily go on with plenty more of them, so be sure to leave your hottest Pokemon takes down in the comments. Also, if you want, you can go over to check out my other channel that discusses other topics, or to my Patreon for exclusive videos. Also, be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.